tell me why he believes. Yeah, go for it, Jason.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. Well, yeah, I basically heard about your show and was kind of spurned into calling. So I'm not sure where you'd like to begin, but I mean, I have many reasons, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's define what we're talking about. Are you a Christian in the sense that you believe that there was a guy named Jesus and he died for everybody's sins about 2,000 years ago, or some sort of variation of that?
No, absolutely. I base my beliefs, or I base all of my knowledge on the validity of the Bible.
Okay. Interesting. So, okay, validity of the Bible. Do you mean like the Bible is like the source of all knowledge, or do you think that we can't know things without the Bible, or kind of tell me a bit more about that?
I think the Bible has, I mean, when it comes to origin, obviously, I don't think science will ever do any better than the Bible, obviously, because, I mean, people have the misconception that science is apart from God, which it couldn't be farther from the truth. God made science. He created the physical realm. He created the time-space continuum, which science has no explanation for whatsoever. I mean, Darwinian theory, it can't hold a light to the origin of time-space continuum. But the Bible actually explains it very well. In Genesis, it says, in the beginning, that's time, God created the heavens, that's space, and the earth, that's matter. So, and those three things have to come into existence at once, at one time, or because all of them are basically, they demand the others to exist. You can't have you can't have any amount of matter placed anywhere without space or time, because you wouldn't have a when or a where.
Interesting. Okay. Well, let me ask you this, because I am really familiar with the story of Genesis. I think a lot of people are, as far as a creation of the universe and things like that. But why are you convinced that the Genesis story in particular is more true than, say, I don't know, the Hindu story of creation?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that would have to be based on, first of all, I mean, if you really want to go with Hindu, you might want to use a different one, because if you start with the Hindu religion as a premise, it's based on a paganism of multiple gods, and that in itself, by definition, actually kind of determines their fate when it comes to that. Because I believe in an all-powerful one God.
Well, hold on. Wait, why does let's back up a bit. Why does their belief in multiple gods necessarily make their origin story not true?
Well, because it's multiple. So it's plurality. And what we're talking about is a singularity that created a plurality.
Okay. So because there is a singularity event, you do believe in like some sort of singularity kind of, is what you're saying?
Well, the Bible explains it. And, God being a non-created, the non-created being.
Did you come to the conclusion that there is a singularity from the Bible? I think, isn't that a kind of a scientific phenomenon that we're talking about here? Like, doesn't science kind of tell us that something like that happened at the beginning?
Absolutely. It's called the Big Bang Theory.
Okay.
And that absolutely is exactly what the Bible says happened.
You think, okay, so because I know there's people who are very interested in physics and who will send me all kinds of things. I'm not trying to conflate the Big Bang Theory with other kinds of cosmological theories of origin and stuff here. Okay, we're just kind of talking in very casual terms. Just FYI, don't at me on Twitter. Okay, but so that's interesting. Okay, so if the Bible had said something else, like if the Bible had said, I don't know, that water came first or fire came first before water or something. It had some sort of different order.
The whole Bible out.
Yeah, like if
the whole Bible out.
So the whole Bible would just not be true to you.
Absolutely. If you could ever legitimately falsify the Bible, and I'm talking of any minute detail, when we're talking about the original writings, I would completely throw out the whole Bible.
What would constitute something being falsified in the Bible to you?
Anything that you could prove is false.
Okay, so like, can you give me an example?
Sure. If you could prove that, in the original writings, I'm not talking about the Apocrypha or the Deuterocanonical Bibles or the Deuterocanonical books that Catholics take as canon. I'm talking about, King James Version, where King James got all the best scribes in the world to transmit the Bible and from the original writings. Many within the 1st century AD, very close to Jesus' existence. If you could ever prove any historical account to be false, which would be it'd be pretty hard to do.
Yeah.
But let's say maybe a moral. I believe in objective truth, and I will never not believe in objective truth. So let's use that. If you could prove that if there was some objective truth in the Bible that was false, I would throw it out.
Okay. Objective truth.
And let me say, I used to not believe. This is something I came to after a lot of research and life experience.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So your criteria kind of is the Bible kind of has these objective truths, and if anything were to contradict these objective truths that come from the Bible, then the Bible would be proved false. That's kind of what you're saying.
I would throw it out today.
Okay.
It might take me a while to determine it. But if you want to start there, how about objective truth or objective morality?
Well, I want to ask you this though, Jason, because if we're starting with the standard that the Bible is objective truth, then wouldn't by necessity everything we come across outside of the Bible that contradicts it just not be true?
It's called sola scriptura, which is Greek for only Scripture, and that is basically I can make conjecture all I want based on the context of the Bible. So that's why it does pretty much encompass anything I can think of morally, but yeah.
Okay, so if we're talking about incidental details and things like that, I think there are some people who would try to make the case that there are kind of little tiny bits of contradictions and stuff in the Bible. But I guess I'm more interested in like how you view reality if we're talking about the Bible being objectively true on all things. Like, do you take, for example, like that the earth is 6,000 years old?
Oh, no. And nowhere in the Bible does it say that. I don't know. That's a weird idea that was propagated a while back by, I'm sure, people who don't know what they're talking about, like, flat earthers and stuff like that. There's a lot of ways to debunk Christianity by just debunking Christians. And I think that's a very misconstrued idea that you can debunk Christ by people who believe in Christ. We're all sinners. We all fall short. And so, nowhere in the Bible does it say that the earth is 6,000 years old. Actually, in the contrary, it says that God hovered over the waters before he molded the earth. He hovered over the waters of earth. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And then nowhere in the Bible does it say, he made the Bible or he made the world. It doesn't say he created the world in 6 days. In the beginning, he created heaven and earth. It doesn't mean that the beginning was that.
For sure. Thank you for your answer, Jason. I want to let Neil ask some questions here in a second, but before I do that, we're talking about the Big Bang before, and you said that the Bible supports the Big Bang, but I don't remember if God is hovering over the waters of the earth. Was there waters during the Big Bang? Was that happening too? Does that match up with the scientific model, you think?
Oh, absolutely not. That's what I mean is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. That would be the beginning. That is the beginning of the time-space continuum as we know it.
But okay, but it says heavens and the earth. So, and you're saying heaven. You said earth is the matter, kind of. That's kind of what
Earth is part of the matter.
Part of the matter. Because I do know for a fact, and we could look at this. I do know that the earth was not there at the Big Bang. I think that's something we could. I don't know any scientific models that say that far, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
I mean, that goes against the laws of physics, because you cannot add or subtract matter
right
from the universe. So all the matter that ever existed or will exist happened at one time. And okay.
Okay. I'm not sure I'm following exactly what you're saying, but Neil just joined us here. Hey, Neil, how's it going?
Hi, sorry.
That's okay. We had some technical difficulties here. Have you caught up on the conversation so far, Neil?
A little bit.
Yeah. So Jason is a Christian, and he's just kind of telling us why he believes. And Jason says that the Bible is kind of his source of objective truth. And we were just kind of discussing ways of how we could know that the Bible is true. And I kind of went on a tangent there. We were talking about Genesis as an example, but that's kind of where we're at the conversation.
How did you determine that the Bible is actually true?
Great question.
Okay. Well, and in the beginning of my search for truth, I would never believe someone who said they truly believed in God, because I was very, I was a realist. I am a realist. I consider myself a realist, and I don't understand how someone could have actual faith in something that they can't sense with their five senses. So I could never understand that. But okay. And if I don't want to start here, because we could end on the note that it's hard to debate with someone who won't take in personal experience in matters of the heart and mind as truth, like love, and.
Ooh, let me ask this: were personal experiences part of the reason why you believe?
Well, of course.
Okay.
Of course, that's personal revelation, but I won't use that. That becomes a circular argument very quickly. I'm not going to use. I'm not going to base my argument on something you already don't understand. But
I think that's very noble of you. So.
Oh well, thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate that, and I love you guys. I'm here. I love all people. I love all my brothers and sisters, and I'm just here trying to talk to you guys. I hope you guys don't mind.
So I guess
Not at all.
how I would frame this conversation, Jason, is like Neil and I we're both believers ourselves. At least, well, Neil is an interesting case, but I was definitely a believer in Christianity and the Christian God,
right.
and it was because of part of my search into what is true and what is not true and stuff, and looking into biblical history and biblical scholarship in particular, that I understood that the Bible was not a reliable source in terms of historical events and in terms of kind of historical narratives and things like that, and what it kind of told. Of course, I cannot verify every single thing in the Bible to be true or false. And besides just contradictions, it seems to me that the Bible at least tells some stories that are kind of, one, that are hard to believe, but also seem to contradict what kind of secular sources have told us about history and about what has physically happened, at least here on Earth. But it seems to me that like your understanding of the Bible is that it doesn't actually contradict in that it's actually telling pretty much all true things, and that if any of it wasn't true, that it becomes false. Is kind of what you're telling me.
Well, I believe God used the Israelites and the Greeks and the Romans for a big reason. They're historians. And if you believe in Caesar, then you should definitely believe in Christ, because there's far more literature based on Christ and the empty tomb. So if and we're talking about we're going to start talking about stories in the Bible, obviously. So when you said that there has never been historical account in the Bible that has been contradicted or proven wrong.
Really?
And which
Really?
again would be tough to do without a first person account. Okay, and I understand that. Prophecy in the Bible, there's over 400 prophecies pertaining to Christ alone, and that's aside from the actual religion. There's many prophecies in the Bible.
Can you
my
name
favorite
some,
being
possibly? Are you
Isaiah
speaking
53.
from the Old Testament?
Well, I think a good question to ask next, I think, because I've heard of a lot of, Jason, like a lot of these arguments of what I'm hearing right now are stuff that I've heard before and are stuff that in my personal search I've kind of looked into. Do you think you could give me like just one example of that makes you know that actually let me back up a little bit here, because we are talking about the Bible as a whole, like as an anthology of different books. And this is something that annoys me when people do talk about the Bible. They talk about it as if it's just this one singular entity, which, I mean, it is, but like the writers and the time periods discussed in there go through a whole range and people had different perspectives and theological assumptions and things like that. I want to go back to this idea of the Bible itself being true, like as a whole, and how we know that the Bible is true, because I don't know that the Bible is true. So if you could convince me, Jason, that the Bible is true, that it's true to that everything it says it's true, like what would you tell me?
Okay. Well, I guess, let me see. I can't use the Bible as the best reason to believe in God because you don't believe in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say personal account. Let's start with objective morality.
Okay.
That's a good one. That helped me a lot.
Okay.
Objective morality. Do you believe in objective morality?
Well, does the objective morality, does that pertain to why you believe the Bible is true?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's a kind of a tricky thing, because I definitely don't want to go into a separate kind of discussion about morality and stuff, because morality you can talk about all day, but I'm not sure how the truth about objective morality relates to the truth about the Bible describing like
because within context, the Bible explains objective morality to the T.
Well, aren't there other books that can talk about objective morality though that don't necessarily have to be true?
No, absolutely. Wait, if it's correct about the objective morality, then it's at least true about that. But you don't have to be completely, true in your veracity to be right about something.
Sure. So
a broken clock is right twice a day.
Sure, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. So I'm wondering why we're talking about objective morality then, because if it could be true but also be false about some other things but still be right about objective morality, then why should we talk about objective morality?
Because why? Because I'm sure you're somewhat time on a time frame.
I am,
and I don't. And the Bible, the veracity of the Bible would take a very long time, and I to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and I mean, yeah.
Let's we can narrow that down a little bit then.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to I don't know, Neil. Pick a part of the Bible we could talk about. Yeah, Genesis, maybe the Gospels.
Genesis works for me because it's also applicable in the Torah, which is what I grew up learning.
Let's talk about the book of Genesis. How do we know that the book of Genesis or the contents within it are true?
Well, we know certain
How do
parts
we know that it's
aren't?
How do we know certain parts are true?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and that is again why it's hard to start like that, because a lot of the things in Genesis can't be proven even by modern physics. I take it as true based on the veracity of the whole Bible and my own personal experience.
Wait, well, why would we?
So there are things.
So wait,
that I have no way. Oh, I'm sorry.
What is personal experience? How does that tell us about the truth of Genesis?
Yeah, it really doesn't.
Well, I'm not going to use that as an argument for this.
Okay.
I will mention it.
Okay.
I will mention it because that is the truth, and I'm not going to lie. That personal account has to do with your own individual understanding of the truth, right?
Yes, in some ways, but my personal experience also doesn't tell me anything about the origins of the universe, for example.
Absolutely. That's why what I'm saying is, if I already take Christ as truth, and if I know Christ isn't a liar, then what he says, and he references the Old Testament numerous times during his life, then I have to take what he's referencing also as truth. So I won't lie. There's some things in Genesis that I may not be able to prove or come to an understanding of without the Bible. I understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. So how do we know what Christ was true?
Okay, so again, that's why it'd be a very long, week long, I would say, with no sleep to prove the Bible to someone. You know, you got to do your own reading, which it's good because you guys probably know a lot about the Bible, and that's a good base to shoot from. Little platform we got there, which is pretty cool. By the way, real quick, how long were you guys Christian? When did you stop believing? And was it a traumatic experience that one single traumatic experience where you said, "Hey, I'm done with this," or was it more of a gradual? You know, woke up one day and realized you don't believe anymore?
Well, I think. Honestly, we could talk about that for a long time, too. I briefly, to kind of give you my story, I grew up in the Christian church. I was part of the youth group. I was part of the college ministry. I did stuff with church camps and stuff. I did D-Now weekends. I mean, you name it. And then I started questioning my faith while I was in college. I had a conversation with a dude that really helped out. That's on YouTube. And I started going from there. I started exploring, and eventually I became an atheist after several prolonged periods of research. And it wasn't really one single traumatic moment, as you might describe it. It was more of a protracted look into, the world and its history and philosophy and things like that. I'm sure Neil could tell you something similar. Yeah.
Yeah, I could. I mean, I was raised in the Jewish faith. So, and I did things like you, Dan, where I went to a camp that was revolving around the Jewish faith. And I had Hebrew school. And I think my biggest thing is once you start to realize that the stories that you're told sound a heck of a lot like a lot of the other mythologies that you were also learned about in school and stuff like Greek and Roman, et cetera. And to me, they just sounded like more mythological stories, and especially some of them that were blatant ripoffs of earlier versions, like Noah's flood ripoff of the Epic of Gilgamesh. And there are at least a few other flood stories that I also found particularly interesting, that these stories came from areas that are now known, maybe not then known, but now known as floodplain type areas. So,
yeah. So hopefully that answers your question, Jason.
Yeah. So it was like a minor.
So you're saying that how could you determine that the myth of the flood was, well, as you put it, was basically ripped off by Moses? How would you be able to prove that?
Moses. It's a Sumerian story called the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Right. Epic of Gilgamesh, yes. Dates back 5,000 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's basically not word for word, but it's pretty much the same story. Of course, every time they borrow a story from previous mythologies, they alter it to their own beneficial means or whatever.
So Neil, I think he's asking, how do you know that the Epic of Gilgamesh came before the events of the flood, I guess, or at least the tale of the events of the flood?
Absolutely,
yeah.
Because actually it dates back 5,000 years, correct? The Epic of Gilgamesh, and that's around the same time. So, I mean,
around there or a little bit earlier.
Right. Okay.
Sure.
Well, how would you answer that, Neil?
Well, that story is older than the biblical flood that we know of Noah.
So you're saying, well, you're from Judaism, bud. So you're saying Judaism is not as old as the Sumerians texts?
No, it's not. It didn't come along very long after, but it's not as old.
Okay. So yeah, that to me that wouldn't. I'm sorry, but that I'm not understanding how that proves that it didn't happen. It's more proof that it did happen. It's two separate individual accounts, independent of each other.
Well,
the same thing.
But we're Jason. We're saying they're not independent of each other. We're saying one is copying off of the other one.
Yes, and Gilgamesh actually borrowed from two earlier flood myths as well.
And how would you come to that conclusion? And based off what writings? Because we don't have writings older than that. I mean, and then you're going to have to go to carbon dating, but that's why it's rough.
Well, carbon dating only goes back so far, right? So carbon 14.
It's flawed. And I mean, there's been a lion that was carbon dated to be 4 million years old and on one spot of his body and 250,000 years old on another spot.
I'm kind of confused because you're asking Neil about why he should assume that the Sumerian story is older and more reliable than the Noah's flood story. But I think easily we could ask the same thing about the Christian version. Why should we assume?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why
Whereas I think Neil's conclusion is based off of decades of historical research that has gone into the topics through traditional methods of archaeology and stuff, and another was based on trust that the accounts in the book are accurate.
So there's other reasons as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whatever Neil has to say for it. Yeah.
If you look at the mid-oceanic ridge, I mean, it's pretty obvious that the Earth somehow cracked open, and that's exactly the account of the Bible. Is the waters came from below.
Hmm. Interesting. Got a phone call in the back there, Jason.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
That's all right.
Well, we're about out of time for this call anyway right now, but I don't know, Jason.
So why don't we just before you end? Because that's why I said we shouldn't go into the Bible account because you wouldn't be able to get to actual things. So why don't before you go, why don't you talk a little bit about whether you believe in objective morality, and then go ahead and let it go.
Honestly, if I started talking about that, then you might ask me questions, and we're going to go from there, and stuff. I think it's a nuanced debate, and in short summary,
objective morality.
Objective
nuanced debate. That's pretty.
Yeah, I think the study of ethics has different viewpoints, and there's definitely not one authoritative source.
I just ask you, do you believe that rape is wrong? Do you believe rape is
wrong?
See,
this is what I'm talking about, Jason. You're going to ask me questions about stuff and things like that. I'd rather move on, and maybe we can talk about this in another discussion or something, but I do have some other callers that I'd like to talk to. But I do appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate whatever we got out of it, too, as well.
Yeah, well, if you want to call again next week, that would be awesome. Until then, Jason, I really do appreciate the call. I wish Neil was there at the beginning so we could kind of talk about that together. It was chill. I was trying to work on trying to get you back at the same time as talking and stuff, so I was a little bit distracted, but now you're back. But yeah.
I had a crash go on here. My internet cut out on me.
Oh, that's all right. You're back here now. I think I'm not generally convinced when, and I got to give Jason credit. He said he didn't want to use his personal experiences to convince me whether or not the Bible was true. Although we did have a bit of miscommunication. I think he was trying to tell me about his belief in God rather than the belief in the Bible being true. And I noticed a couple of things that kind of maybe raised a few eyebrows that I didn't get into, like how Darwinism doesn't explain the origins of the universe, which it never claims that it did. Some things like that. And I heard a lot of the talking points that I know that you've heard and I've heard about these kinds of apologetics and stuff that, again, those merit their own kind of arguments on shows that are different from this one. I'm more interested in how people, like the step-by-step conclusions that people came to understanding that their beliefs are true. And I think that gets kind of lost on people who are kind of used to some other kinds of programs. I will say this, though. I did notice that he asked us, I don't know if you noticed this, he asked us what was our experience and how did we kind of deconvert? And he said, was it because of some sort of trauma or something? It was like one traumatic experience that kind of made us lose everything, which is kind of interesting.
I've noticed myself that those incidences, at least that in any talking about it that I've ever done, they're rarer. It's basically come to the conclusion that they just don't believe anymore for whatever reasons, and it's rarer to hear that it was something traumatic. Although I have heard a couple at least of those kinds of instances, and I knew of one person who had a traumatic event that they caused them to leave the faith, but they ended up going back. So, were they really ever out of it, or were they just angry at God?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think when we talk about Christianity, I know when I talked about it in my belief, we talked about the moments in our lives where we kind of found God, in a sense, where it was about personal experience, when we did personally experience God, and how we knew those experiences to be kind of true in that sense. And so I think it makes sense from the Christian's perspective to talk about atheism in a similar sense, to be like, oh, what was the experience you had that kind of led you to that belief being true or not true, So I can see where the framework kind of sets place, and why barriers in communication can kind of prevent progress sometimes. When we talk about this stuff. I don't think that was the most progressive conversation we've ever had on here, but I would like to talk about that some more, because there's a lot of beliefs there that we could definitely examine, I think.